On December 11, 2017, Pastor Chidiebere Okoroafor invited his choir mistress, Orlunma Nwagba, to meet up with him so that they could find a solution to a huge secret that could destroy his reputation, his standing in the community, his livelihood, and the image of his church. It was a secret he couldn't afford to let become public knowledge. Orlunma then informed her friend Chigozie Ezenwa, who was also her church member, to escort her to the location given by the pastor. Chigozie couldn't afford to leave her 9-month-old daughter, Christabel Ezenwa, behind, since her husband was not home. So Orlunma assisted her in carrying Christabel by piggybacking her. Before they left the house, Chigozie asked her neighbor to help inform her husband, Joseph, who wasn't home at the time, that they'd gone to meet with Pastor Okoroafor over the personal issue she told him about. This single act by Chigozie would later turn out to become the most crucial clue in solving this case. When Joseph returned from work that day, he searched everywhere for his wife and daughter, but they were nowhere to be found. He called his relatives and friends, but none of them could give him the slightest clue on their whereabouts. He asked the neighbors who were available at the time, but still couldn't get the information he was looking for. The search continued till 11 p.m. that night, before he finally met the neighbor whom Chigozie had asked to inform him of their whereabouts. The next day, Joseph visited Pastor Okoroafor to ask about his wife, her friend, and his infant daughter. But to his greatest surprise, the pastor denied ever knowing them. Joseph argued that it was impossible for him not to know his choir mistress and friend. Pastor Okoroafor, feeling cornered by Joseph, then lied that he last saw them 3 months ago. It was at this point that Joseph knew something was terribly wrong, because 2 weeks before her disappearance, his wife had told him that she would be going to the church along with her friend Orlunma to pray with the pastor. Joseph decided to report the matter to the Rivers State Police Command. The police carried out their preliminary investigations, which was crucially aided by the testimony from the neighbor who knew of their whereabouts. 2 days after filing the missing person report, Joseph received a phone call from the police, asking him to come and meet them in a certain location. Unknown to Joseph, this was just one out of 2 phone calls that would shatter his world into 1,000 pieces. When he got to the bushy area, he found the body of his infant daughter, Christabel, and that of his friend's wife, Orlunma, but his wife, Chigozie, was nowhere to be found. He was broken beyond repair, but things were about to get even worse for him. 5 days after the initial discovery, Joseph got another phone call from the police. This time around, the decomposing remains of his wife, Chigozie, had been discovered in an uncompleted building. One could only imagine the kind of pain Joseph was going through at that period. The police invited Pastor Okoroafor for questioning, but he did his best to maintain his innocence. He gave the police vague answers, trying to distance himself from the murders. But the more they pressed, the more his story began to fall apart. Unknown to him, not only were the police aware that both women had gone to see him the day they disappeared, the police were also able to establish a motive for him to possibly commit the crime. It turned out that the secret he was willing to go to any length to protect was not so much of a secret, as Chigozie's neighbors were fully aware of it, and so did the police. Since Pastor Okoroafor's stories were not aligning with what the police already knew about him, they decided to detain him in the station for further interrogation. Pastor Chidiebere Okoroafor was the general overseer of the Altar of Solution Church based in the Oyigbo area of Port Harcourt, Rivers State, Nigeria. He was originally from Abia State, but resided in Rivers State, where he practiced as a pastor. Orlunma was a choir mistress in his church, and the two had gotten to know each other through their frequent encounters in church. The police continued their interrogation, and they made their evidence against him undeniable. Faced with this mounting pressure, Pastor Okoroafor finally cracked. He confessed to committing the horrific murders and then went on to give the details on what led to the act. It turned out that Pastor Okoroafor was having a secret affair with his 25-year-old choir mistress, Orlunma. They were doing a very good job in keeping their relationship a secret until the affair produced a problem that made the pastor very desperate to keep from becoming public knowledge. Orlunma became pregnant for Pastor Okoroafor. She informed him about the pregnancy and also expressed a strong desire to keep the child. But this didn't sit well with the pastor, as he had a lot to lose should his illicit affair with a fellow church member become public knowledge. Orlunma was unmarried, and in a church setting like theirs, news of an out-of-wedlock pregnancy, especially one involving the pastor, would have been scandalous. It wasn't just Orlunma's reputation that was at stake, it was Pastor Okoroafor's very livelihood, his standing in the community, and the image of the church. If people knew the truth, everything he had worked for would come crashing down. The only way to prevent that was to either destroy any evidence of the affair or do what it takes to make sure that the truth never came to light. Pastor Okoroafor tried the first option. He asked Orlunma to abort the pregnancy, but she stood her ground on giving birth to the child. This dragged on till the pregnancy got to 5 months. Seeing that his persuasion was going nowhere and that it was just a matter of time before her pregnancy becomes obvious to everyone, which would then lead to questions about the father, he decided to move to the second option. Pastor Okoroafor invited Orlunma to come and meet him in the church. He was expecting her to come alone, but when she showed up with her friend Chigozie and her infant daughter Christabel, things got complicated for him. Orlunma had brought Chigozie along so that she can help her persuade him to let her keep the pregnancy. Also, Pastor Okoroafor was not aware that Orlunma had shared her ordeal with her neighbors, so the secret he was trying so hard to protect was not so much of a secret. Pastor Okoroafor decided to change his plans. He took advantage of the trust the two church members had in him and then lured them to an isolated area. The first sign of trouble came when Pastor Okoroafor separated the two women. He told Orlunma to wait at a distance while he spoke privately with Chigozie. Pastor Okoroafor then lured Chigozie to an uncompleted building nearby, where he tragically snuffed out her life. This was only the beginning of the horror he had planned to unleash that day, as his next victims were just a short distance away. After committing the heinous act, he rejoined Orlunma at where she had been waiting. It is unknown what he said to her, but whatever he told her was enough to ease any suspicion she might have had. Pastor Okoroafor then led her away from the building and down the road where they boarded a tricycle. They later took a commercial motorcycle and headed towards a remote area. Orlunma was carrying more than just the weight of her secret pregnancy that day. Strapped to her back was 9-month-old Christabel, the child of Chigozie. When they arrived at a bush along the road, Pastor Okoroafor led Orlunma down a narrow path where he also tragically ended both her life and that of young Christabel. He left Orlunma in the bush with Christabel still strapped to her back. The remains were discovered 2 days later by community members, while Chigozie's remains were found 5 days after. Pastor Okoroafor blamed the devil for these unthinkable crimes, which was such a lame and ridiculous thing to say. On paper, he took 3 lives that day, but if you look at it critically, you realize that it was actually 4. The altar of Solution Church was shut down as members of the church who heard about the incident immediately dissociated themselves from the church. On June 5, 2023, Pastor Chidiebere Okoroafor was sentenced to death by hanging for the murders of his choir mistress, Orlunma Nwagba, her friend Chigozie Ezenwa, and Chigozie's 9-month-old daughter, Christabel Joseph. The evidence against him was undeniable, including his own confessions. Yet, despite the clear facts, his lawyers insisted on his innocence and even announced his plans to appeal the ruling. It's truly disturbing to think that, after such a horrific crime, anyone could still fight to protect him from the justice that his victims deserve. This case serves as a powerful reminder that not everyone can be trusted, even those who wear the cloak of faith. It's crucial to always let others know your whereabouts, especially when meeting people behind closed doors. And most importantly, we must remain cautious about who we trust with our lives. Stay informed, stay vigilant. If you learned something from this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more true crime stories. Thank you for watching and stay safe.